A government watchdog group sues President Trump over an obscure clause in the Constitution. But what do the constitutional scholars behind the lawsuit really want? And will they even get a day in court? I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, and this Right Angle is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. Well, men, as our viewers know, the emoluments clause is found in Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution and says, quote, "No title of nobility shall be granted by the United States, and no person holding any office of profit or trust under them shall, without the consent of the Congress, accept any present, emolument, office, or title of any kind whatever from any king, prince, or foreign state." End quote. However, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, aka C.R.E.W, backed by constitutional scholars like Lawrence Tribe, Erwin Chemerinsky, and Zephyr Teachout, claim that Donald Trump has violated that clause because his hotels and resorts accept payments from guests who are employed by foreign governments. Now, regardless of the merits of the C.R.E.W lawsuit, they first have to pass the bar of standing before the court. In other words, to even get a hearing, they have to prove that they have suffered harm from Trump and that the court could remedy that situation. How has C.R.E.W suffered harm? C.R.E.W says Trump's conflicts of interest have forced it to divert limited resources from its regular government watchdog role, in part because C.R.E.W has received hundreds of requests from the media to talk about the emoluments clause lately, and thus C.R.E.W will, quote, essentially be forced into the role of litigating and educating the public regarding his foreign emoluments clause violations, end quote. Now, cynics say that C.R.E.W filed this frivolous lawsuit merely to force Trump to release his tax returns, which he has promised he would do just as soon as his latest IRS audit wraps up. Stephen Green, when the left is out of power in the executive and legislative branches, doesn't it make sense for them to use their remaining lever of power by waging lawfare? And what do you think of the standing question here?
Well, first, I'd just like to say that, man, those of us on the right, whether we're the conservative right or the libertarian right, we suck at this lawfare stuff. It doesn't seem to occur to us to do this kind of thing. I'm not saying we're actually better than them. I'm just saying the way we're wired, yeah, I know. I was trying to be nice, Bill.
Well, Charles Murray couldn't even get us to do it with his great book a couple of years ago.
No, he couldn't. And we did a couple of shows on the old network about that very thing. And we suck at this. We are not wired to think in this devious little nitpicky, how do I get the slightest wedge in there kind of way like the left does. And you got to give them credit. They've been practicing this stuff for a century now, and they're very, very good at it. We've got to get just as good at it. As to the standing issue, as best I understand this, they believe their standing, their harm, is that they're going to have to talk about this, and so they should have to talk about it more in a court of law. Do I have that right, Scott?
Hey, that's as good an explanation as I've heard anybody give.
All right. And it's probably a better explanation than you're going to get from any of them at the C.R.E.W. By the way, this is not to be confused with the Cruz Crew, which I'm a former member. So look, yeah,
or J. Crew for that matter.
What I would like to see, ideally, this is, as you said, a frivolous lawsuit. What I'd like to see is the founders overlooked something. Foreign emoluments, that has to do with actually getting a payment or title. It doesn't have to do with doing business with a corporation that is in part owned by an individual. But what I would like to see, what I think is necessary for good government, and that the founders overlooked, I don't think this kind of thing existed 200 plus years ago, is that when you're entering any elected office in the federal government, your assets should go into a blind trust, and any seats on any boards that you may hold should be surrendered upon taking the oath of office. I believe in clean government, and I think that's the right way to do it, not through frivolous lawfare suits.
Now, just to bring up George Washington's side of the argument against Stephen Green, Washington, in fact, frankly, I believe 4 of his successors to the office of the presidency actually continued to operate their farming businesses, even selling and buying things from overseas during the course of their presidencies. And if you've ever read George Washington's correspondence, you know that he gave very detailed instructions to the people who were running his plantation back in Virginia. So he was heavily involved in his business at the time.
Sure he was, but the federal government didn't have its fingers fingers in every single pie like it does today.
You know the French prince was buying up that tobacco from the Washington, from Mount Vernon. Bill Whittle, if Donald Trump would simply have released his tax returns, this particular lawsuit probably would not have happened. And these constitutional scholars aren't the first to raise the conflict of interest question with Trump's businesses. So what's the best constitutional remedy for this question?
Drop the case. You know, I mean, just it's not a case, Scotty. The reason that this entire thing is in the Constitution is to avoid influence peddling. It's basically a way to make sure that you can't be bribed by a foreign power with either nobility, titles of nobility, or money, or so on. And it's not reasonable to assume that a man who's already a billionaire, who is known for owning multiple properties all across the world, whose name is on virtually every one of them, up very, very high, and is on his own jet and all the rest of it, it's a little bit silly to assume that somebody has to now sue him because he's a businessman. I mean, as you said, George Washington and all of these early presidents ran their businesses while they were president. Now, I believe Trump has signed all those businesses over to his son in terms of control of all of that stuff. So there's that. The main thing here is, again, it's just lawfare. It's not even, it just occurred to me just now because we talked about this yesterday. I don't even think that it's that I don't even think they think they're going to get a chance in court. I think it's just mudslinging. I think it's just another attempt to delegitimize Trump. I could sue Hillary Clinton for, felony child abuse or something like that and never, ever have a moment in court. But if the news media picks it up and talks about it all the time, then there you go. So we can expect to see a lot of this in the years to come. It's going to get very, very ugly. And there's something strange about Donald Trump, and that is that no one seems to care. I mean, it's like we knew what we were getting when we bought the package, and I don't think that this is something that the American people are going to impeach him over.
Yeah, and if I understand it, Bill, isn't he still foregoing his $400,000 a year salary as president?
Yes.
And we're supposed to believe that some foreign prince spending the night at a Trump hotel is somehow going to influence his decision making. I don't buy it.
Yeah, but obviously the great irony here, of course, is this is precisely exactly what Hillary Clinton has been doing with the Clinton Foundation for the last 8, 10, 12 years.
I can just see the call coming into the Oval Office. Mr. President, Shake Your Booty is calling from the quid pro quo suite at the Trump Resort in Macau. Like to have a chat with you. Even a cursory reading of history, of the Constitution, of any law dictionary, or of Supreme Court precedent would lead one to believe that the emoluments clause was meant, as Bill suggests, to prevent foreign governments from bribing U.S. politicians or engaging in the aforementioned quid pro quo. President Trump has turned over the management of his businesses to his children and has pledged to donate to the U.S. Treasury any proceeds from foreign government guests at his properties. The so-called constitutional scholars filing this lawsuit certainly know that it's frivolous. They must expect it to be thrown out of court, both for its lack of merit and for their lack of standing. But the federal court should not simply tolerate this abuse of our justice system for the partisan political purposes they intend. They should be punished heavily for this maneuver. Candidate Donald Trump should have released his tax returns or refused to do so, instead of kicking the can down the road with that baloney about the IRS audit. Just shoot straight with the people. By the same token, if the left wants Trump to release his tax returns, they should plainly state that as well. Now, as Bill hinted, the rich irony here, of course, is to see supporters of Democrat politicians concerned that money changing hands from foreign governments to American politicians might create a conflict of interest. If the crew over at C.R.E.W are a bit overwhelmed by tracking Trump's ethics, perhaps they could bring on some extra staff, thanks to a generous grant from the Clinton Foundation. For Bill Whittle, Stephen Green, and the Right Angle team, I'm Scott Ott. Thank you to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.